Hello, I'm Severin Walker, Chairman of the MAAWG Board of Directors, and I'm joined today by the keynotes of our MAAWG 45th meeting here in San Francisco. Ashley Maria, the Director, and Leanne Burst, the producer of Pioneers in Skirts, a new documentary about women in tech and the struggles that they currently endure. Also with us is Janet Jones, MAAWG's Vice Chairperson and the leader of our current initiatives for diversity and inclusion. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Pioneers in Skirts is a film about sexism in the industry, a bit about the history of sexism in the industry, where we've been, kind of where we're going, especially within STEM. It's a fairly big topic and definitely in the news today, and it seems like not necessarily one that you guys were seeking to cover, both as a documentarian and as people involved in the industry. But how did it find you?
So Pioneers in Skirts came about not only because of tech, but because of women in film, women at top levels, at every level in every company. We're all facing, it's pervasive across all industries, there is an issue going on that is preventing women from reaching their full potential. And it's something that I discovered very quickly in my career when I saw that my male colleagues were getting jobs, were getting hired based on their potential, and I was not. And so I started to look internally and say, what's going on here? What am I doing wrong? And come to find out there's a lot of stereotypes, a lot of bias, a lot of sexism that's working against me that I wasn't prepared for. Mm-hmm. And I went to my mom, Leanne, and I said, what's going on? What am I supposed to do? And she alone, she didn't know, and also I was looking at the same issues that she was facing when she started her career. So we knew there was something here. There weren't solutions out there that were just tangible. Let's move on. Let's get on from this, right? So we knew we needed to work together to make Pioneers in Skirts so that women in all industries can start to see that it's not their fault. There's something else going on here. Now, what are we going to do about it? Mm-hmm.
I know that historically, some of the lower paid jobs in the 1950s and 60s, ironically, were programming jobs for women. And then with the personal computer boom in the 80s, it became more of a male focus. The computer was for the boys in the household, and it was for playing games in the household. And that, in turn, has had an effect on the overall science and technology field today. Do you see things evolving, or how do you see things overcoming that stigmatism?
I don't know. I mean, I was one of those kids, right? I graduated from college in 1984. I was one of those kids that wanted to play with those computers, and I actually was a computer room tutor, and I was tutoring in BASIC. Oh. Do you remember that? Yeah. That was me. And I was kind of pushed out of it. I didn't feel welcome, to walk in and take ownership of that. I was intimidated by the math. I was intimidated by the people in the room and the professors. How do I know all this right now? Because, well, by making the movie, you refresh it in your mind and what happened. Is that happening today? It kind of is. It kind of is. I'm happy that there are organizations out there that are stepping in and trying to mentor high school students, mm-hmm. young girls, young boys, to learn about the topic, and then I also like the fact that teachers are being taught, hey, you can't be talking to students this way. You got to make them feel welcome. So I think that things are changing, but we are seeing lots of data that show women are going to college. Some of them are not graduating, but when they do graduate, they're not taking the jobs. Mm.
And I do want to jump in and say that we left my industry, which is where I was having my issues, and looked into the tech fields because there was so much action going on to figure out what's going on. Sure. And all the research was there, and so that's where our film is heavily focused on certain aspects of the tech industry because they were actively pursuing change. Right.
Now, MAAWG's an organization that we try to have a global reach, and we try to be as inclusive as possible because it is a working group, and we're attempting to find solutions to a lot of anti-abuse and security issues. And so, the more voices, the better in those cases. And I know, Janet, you've been leading up quite a few initiatives that are trying to help bring in that diversity and that inclusion to the organization.
Right. I've been with the MAAWG organization about 5 years now. And literally when I started working with MAAWG, interesting dynamic. I remember the first session that I got up and hosted for the anti-pervasive monitoring SIG, and I could literally count, only a handful of women in the entire room. And it's phenomenal to see just today with our keynote session how that has vastly grown. But we're not there yet. We're not at parity. That's one of the things that we're looking to drive over the next few years. It's not going to be something you check boxes and then all of a sudden we're done. I mean, there's no ending place of saying we've done diversity and inclusion, so now let's go do something else. It's basically a cultural shift for the whole organization, and not just something that we can do today.
So what are the things that you have done?
So some of the things that we have done, we've put together, I guess the first and foremost is a safe zone. So we've created a safe zone, we've updated our code of conduct policy. And what that means is we want people to realize that safety, protection, respectfulness is the #1 priority. If we don't do anything else from diversity and inclusion, we want people to feel like they can come to the events and feel safe. We want them to feel like they have a voice. We want them to feel like they're included with everything. Outside of that, when we look at the more proactive things, I think a code of conduct policy just being the structure of just the basics we have to do. When I look at other things, I look at mentorship, creating a mentorship program so that we have, I think we spoke about sponsors, having sponsors to be able to not only help the mentors, but actually have that authoritative source of being able to help them accomplish what they want to do. Other things, we've created office hours. So I think we talked a little bit about opening the doors for people to be included within different committees and SIGs. So it's very important to have that open feeling, because sometimes, people will say, I just don't feel like I can go in and say something behind a senior technical advisor because I don't feel included. So we are opening up that avenue for people to be able to come in and make those choices and be included. So we have a long journey ahead, but we've got a good start over the last 2 years. We have open roundtable discussions. We have birds of a feather discussions. We have luncheons. And I think one of the most powerful things that we have is the ability for people to share experiences. So we have different diverse groups come in, whether it be men or women, and then share their experiences about things. And I think we learn more from experiences than we do actually from the technical presentations.
That's great.
There's definitely tools and tactics that we're finding kind of helps with these processes. Throughout your interviews and in making this film, it does become apparent that it's not, the onus isn't on the girl or the young professional to try and necessarily fight her way into this, but that the culture has to change, that there has to be some people supporting that effort. And what have you found that has been useful or interesting anecdotally that assisted that journey?
Well, for a young woman, right, I think as you said, the sponsorship, right? Young women are in an environment where there's bias that they're not even prepared for. Some things happen along the way where women grow up and know that they can do anything they want to do, and they're going after it. But once they fall into line at work, they show up through the door, within 2 years, and we have studies that have shown that within 2 years, their ambition plummets by
60%.
60%.
That's a large number.
That's
Yes.
Unfortunately a horrible number. But as a result, what can you do? Well, you have to change the company culture, and as you're doing in this organization, it's a team effort to do that. Everybody has to understand what's going on and pitch in to change the culture. But you can't do that with a magic wand, and you can't do it overnight, as you were saying. So we feel that we traveled the entire nation for 4 years. We did a lot of research before we even did that. And we came up with a few things that really knocked it out of the park. One of them is sponsorship, as I just said. And to have a sponsor who can go to bat for you and help you overcome that bias within your workplace culture, that's golden. That's absolutely golden. A young woman definitely needs that.
Well, how do you find those sponsors?
It's not easy, is it?
No.
Not easy. And the interesting thing is a lot of people feel it's very difficult to find a mentor. Now, a mentor helps you with the tactics,
Right.
right? So I can have a mentor that shows me how to handle a presentation, or maybe a mentor that tells me how they think I can get ahead. So when you go and you want to go after a mentor or a sponsor, you have to know who you want to sponsor you or mentor you, right? And when it comes to a sponsor, you don't want them to know your faults. You don't want that. What you do want is have them see how good you are and what your talent is. When you go in to work and you look at somebody who you admire and you know that they could believe in you, they may not know you yet. You need to volunteer in things that they believe in. So if it's a certain organization within work, definitely volunteer so that person, or if there's a project that they are working on, get involved with that project. Do you agree with that?
Oh, no, I definitely agree. One of the things we've done at MAAWG is making sure that the sponsor is held at the board level, meaning the sponsoring of the whole program. It's not something, if the board level and executive leadership doesn't sponsor and or support, it's not going to be successful.
Yeah.
So totally agree.
Yeah, which is definitely congruous with all the work we do, right? Any sort of security policy in an organization, nonprofit, corporate or otherwise, if it doesn't have that top-down support, if it doesn't have the executive saying that this is important, this is part of our culture, it just can't be taken seriously, or it's just not going to become part of the culture there.
That's interesting. You delineate between sponsor and mentor. I think that's something we could take back into our program, because I think we've mainly focused on the mentoring side.
Sure.
And we could add, another level to see if we can get more sponsorship. So that's a good takeaway.
And we talked about it earlier amongst ourselves, thinking, we've met so many people here, incredibly brilliant people, very talented people. But it's the same with when a woman walks into a job in the beginning of her career. You want her to come here as well, right? You want her to look at people that could sponsor her, maybe not within the organization, which is ideal for you, but maybe also within her career.
Right.
Maybe that person has a lot of clout within the industry that they're in or within the circles that they're in, and they can help her excel. She doesn't need an arm up as much as somebody may think, but she needs someone to knock away those biases and those barriers that she may run into.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a documentarian, which is kind of how you started down this path, I saw you light up in our conversation earlier when I had mentioned the 7 Up series, which kind of covered the British social strata, starting with a set of children in the 1950s and 60s. Is there any plan, or any ideas you've had about following up with some of the young women, or even the issue itself once this documentary completes?
Well, so we have many goals with the film. First of all, it was meant to start a conversation. So to follow up with the girls, the young women in a few years, it's something that it would be interesting to see where they go from here, because we already know, like over the course of the 3 years of just following them, what has changed and evolved for some people that were kind of side subjects, side characters. But right now, their stories are meant to be an example. So to do an analysis of them is something definitely further down the line. But right now, we'd love to be able to do a series that goes into more depth of what's going on, what are the challenges for women right now, but who are the change makers out there actually pushing the conversation forward. And because everyone everywhere, I mean, we're all trying to figure out the solution and make it so that our culture finally, our culture has that tipping point where no longer are all these groups needed, no longer do we need to have these conversations because it's just normal. That might be really far down the line, but that doesn't mean we can't right now start thinking that way.
Sure.
So I wonder what would happen, So we do have a lot of goals with the film. I'd be interested to see what happens in 7 years. in that sense.
Sure.
You know, I'm also interested to see what happens with me in 7 years. You know, I'm like, I'm really excited for my career now because I actually went through this journey and I don't know what would have happened had I not done it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like you can look at the analysis already
Right.
and see, like, here I am. Thank you, Brad.
Yeah. So within a lot of workplaces, you know, some of what you're referring to as far as sponsorship and mentorship still seems, unfortunately, like a radical idea. So how do you suggest, you know, essentially men kind of overcome that stigma and, kind of reach out and, help with this effort?
So to answer your question,
Yeah.
we hear about men not wanting to be involved with mentoring women because of the Me Too movement. But in reality, the sentence is because they are afraid of harassment, of being accused of sexual harassment. And in our opinion is, if there's a man out there who says, I don't want to do this or I'm scared to do this, that means they've never done it before. Because all of us have to enter the situation with, this is something I want to do, this is something I feel like giving back to. And it's not a risk that you're taking, it's something you're doing for the better good, right? Do you not agree?
No, I completely agree. Yeah.
I mean, it would be shocking to me to see a man not want to do it because they're afraid of something.
Yeah, no, in my opinion, it is zero risk. It is nothing but beneficial to, sponsor and endorse this sort of activity, whether it's an organization like MAAWG or within our parent companies that we work our day jobs at. So.
Well, so one pushback that we are getting that might help in this is this idea of diversity and inclusion, like privilege. It gets a kind of pushback because it's interpreted as your life was not difficult because you are a white male. It's like, no, that's not what that means. It just means that you got to start 5 steps ahead versus this woman of color versus this man of color. And so that's something that we want to make clear is like, we're not here just saying, hey men, get out of the way. It's like, you have to be a part of the conversation. We've all got challenges. We just need to realize that some of them aren't as impactful or aren't as, taking away from your career as it is for a woman or a woman of color or a man of color. So that is one pushback we've got.
Yeah, and I think it does help people to realize that, what we're talking about, while the gender gap is definitely, the prime example here, but yeah, various backgrounds, whether someone's an immigrant, whether someone comes from a, socially more economically depressed type area versus someone who, was brought up in middle, upper class environment. This all plays its part in diversity and inclusion, and having these various voices from.
It's all intersectional, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's intersectional, and with the organization being global, it's even more so. There's all sorts of people with different voices and different experiences, and we all have felt not included to the table and oppressed in different ways, and everybody's unique. Everybody's unique.
Yeah, through our outreach efforts, I think, Janet and I especially have been exposed to just even government regulation, right? And that doesn't necessarily inform privilege, but it's yet another element of inclusion where someone from a different country, they're looking at the problem in a completely different manner, but it makes us think about how would we deal with a solution in that framework, and then we can improve our own solutions, by thinking about things in that different frame. And so I think, that's analogous to kind of what we're talking about here, that intersectionality.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to be here with you, and honest to goodness, everybody has been very welcoming. Thank you.
Yes.
Very smart. Very, very good. Very good.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you coming, showing the movie, and speaking to our membership here. I think it comes at a great time for us, and us considering our membership, and who's contributing to the solutions, and for the industry in general. It's a great time to hear about what we could be doing to affect some change in this area.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome.